Welcome to a community built of tomorrow's business leaders. Hey guys, I'm William Freitas, and this is the Socius podcast. All right, welcome Socius. Today we've got Michael Buggy on the show. Michael is from Yegal Paralegals. So Michael, great to have you on the show, mate. I think we'll need to introduce you first. Obviously, you and I have known each other for quite some time. But if you don't mind, mate, please tell us, who you are, what you do, a little bit about your background and what's led you to be to where you are today.
Sure. Thanks very much for having me on, Will. Good to connect again. Yeah, that's right. Michael Buggy is my name. Yegal Paralegal is my business. We're a labour hire business with a focus on legal services. So we connect law student paralegals to law firms and corporate legal teams for short, medium and long-term placements. Business has been around since 2017 rather. It's been a bit of a labour of love for me over those 4 years and, something I'm really passionate about. So, yeah, keen to come on today and chat to you more about my business and my journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we love about this show is particularly that we bring on people that we think is the future leaders of the business world, right? And one thing that I think you're doing differently is you're taking on that legal industry. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that Yegal does, what it is that you're focusing on? What are you disrupting?
Sure. Yeah, look, we're all about resource efficiency.
Okay.
My personal experience as a lawyer was that, and I worked in the legal industry for close on 10 years in litigation and found that law firms and corporate legal teams don't tend to use their junior resources all that efficiently. In law, there's peaks and troughs in demand. If you or your company get sued tomorrow, you may need a team of lawyers for a set period until your piece of litigation comes to an end, and then there might be some downtime. That was something that I observed over time in law firms. A lot of people were really busy and a lot of people were maybe not so busy, depending on what team you worked on. And that was something that I always found really kind of inefficient in terms of how the industry tended to operate. And it was always something that I had observed, through my years in practice. And eventually I just thought, hey, I'm going to go away and try and do something about this. And that's exactly what I did.
Okay, so don't get me wrong, obviously from a bird's eye view from the legal industry, you hear about a ton of people, wanting to become lawyers, and then they work from, whatever it is, 8:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
Yep.
Are you telling me there are teams that aren't that busy and they're leaving earlier, and that's effectively what you're solving so that law firms can get access to a paralegal at any point that they need?
Yeah, look, it's subjective. All law firms and partner lawyers will tell you that they're busy and they're trying to go out every day, win as much business as they can. All we try and do is make sure that at that junior level, those firms are using their resources in the best possible way. What we see at university level especially, which is in the sort of space where we play, is that students go into work if they can secure a job at a law firm, on days when they're not at university. Okay, that's great for them because they can top up their study program with practical experience, but is it best use for the firm? When I was a graduate lawyer, as an example, I was at a mid-tier firm in Sydney and had a great experience there, but I can remember talking to other grads about how their time was often written off an invoice. So stepping back for non-lawyers who might be listening, what happens in the law firm environment is that all lawyers and fee earners are trying to bill as much time as they can during a set month, and at the end of the month the partner will assess whose time goes on the bill to the client. And often the junior hours, which aren't anywhere near as significant in terms of revenue as the senior lawyers, those hours get written off. And what I was seeing and what my colleagues at the time, the other grads, were seeing was that a lot of their time was being written off, and they were saying, it feels like a waste of time that I'm in here. And yeah, look, it's all very subjective, and there's no easy way to I guess modify the model that is law firm. There's a lot of articles and commentary around the industry, and the billable hour is something that comes up quite often. I don't want to sort of present myself as someone who's a huge critic of the industry and how it operates, because right now there's no other sort of better model for the industry to adopt. all I'm trying to say to partners out there and general counsels is, hey, there's a better way to potentially engage these junior resources, and that's through my business that can connect you with trusted, reliable people, at the click of a finger. So, that's my sort of overarching view of legal, and that's, I guess, what drives me every day to try and promote young people and get their foot in the door. That was the other thing that I had encountered, was that growing up in a middle class suburban household, neither of my parents are lawyers. It is very competitive to try and get that opportunity to get your foot in the door, and I found it really hard, unless you have those contacts. And what I see now and what we promote to our paralegals and everyone who we screen is, hey, we can give you that foot in the door. And so far I think we've helped more than 350 law students around the country get their foot in the door, and many of them have gone on to build successful careers, and that's something that I take a lot of personal pride in as well.
I think that's huge. 350 paralegals on its own is a huge number. Given what we read in the papers, right, there are thousands of graduates every year trying to get into the legal industry. And the thing I'm curious the most about is the legal industry is such an old, traditional industry, right? Like, you got all these old partners who are very resistant to change. And you're bringing something that's very different. So what sort of challenges have you faced? How are you getting around that? Are you delivering through an IT system? Talk us through that.
Yeah, look, just touching on your point about, older partners, I can remember in the first year, 2017, that I was out, walking the streets trying to meet partners in firms. This one particular partner, I was pitching all our sort of, business model would build efficiency, make best use of resources. And this one particular partner, he said to me very directly, he said, look, you seem like an excitable young guy, and, you're actually talking a lot of sense, but, I've got a garage full of sports cars at home that tell me that my business model is just fine. So how about you pack up your laptop and, make yourself scarce? And I left with my tail between my legs, but ultimately I think I'll have to last.
Serious rejection.
Yeah, look, you have to go through that process, it's a bit humiliating, but, puts hairs on your chest, and you and I can laugh about it now. So, yeah, it works out okay.
And are you coming to market with an IT platform, or how is it that you're engaging with these clients?
Yeah, interesting. Look, I think everyone thinks that technology has to be at the start of their business, and they talk about, what are you disrupting? I've got a platform for this, platform for Y, but fundamentally any business, you have to be helping people. I was, on the tools full time for Yegal for about 6 months before I met someone who was running a business in similar circumstances, a labour marketplace, but in the sort of communications and media industry. And this guy had a few more runs on the board in terms of experience and, life lessons than I had. And he said to me, look, we had a really flash website and, all of the bells and whistles, but ultimately what we realised is that people just want to be listened to. And when we put all of the IT and that sort of stuff to one side and just organise coffee catch-ups with people who might need assistance, then, the calls and the emails and that started a process. And it was really sound advice, because I was focusing too much on, IT and, I guess, building a nice website, which anyone can do in their back room. But what you really have to do is, pick up your house keys, lock the door up, and go out and talk to people. It's harder, but the rewards are there, and that's, I think, no matter what your industry target is or your customer focus, you just need to focus on talking to people who might want to buy what you have. It's as simple as that. The fundamentals haven't changed for as long as you and I have been around, and probably 100 years before that too.
I think it rings so true. For every single industry, you need to meet a fundamental need. And I often see plenty of startup businesses thinking, every Tom, Dick and Harry thinks they need a software system or an app or something that's going to make someone's life easier. And what you're saying is effectively it doesn't always necessarily mean you need to have a IT system or an IT platform to deliver to market. It's just about, I guess, meeting that fundamental need. And so, I was sort of talking about what sort of challenges are you seeing that you're facing or have faced, particularly in the legal industry in the past, and what's led you to be where you are now? Like, obviously a successful business where you've hired staff, and you continue to manage a winning team, which is cool. What's led you to be to where you are now to get past those challenges?
Yeah, I think, you have to be extremely passionate about what you're doing. If I think back to probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was in a steady law firm job, in a steady relationship. The rest of my life was probably mapped out, but I was unsatisfied for whatever reason. I just knew with myself that I had to get my career to a point where I was satisfied before the rest of my life, personally would, take shape. So at that point, I sort of just drew a line in the sand. I told my family that I was going to do, what I've done, and they kind of probably looked at each other with funny looks and looked at me with a funny look. But, the biggest risk is the risk of sort of sitting on your hands and doing nothing. I think there's a JFK quote touches on something similar to that. The risk of comfortable inaction is far greater than the risk of, doing nothing. So, I was really big on that at the time. But, to answer your question, I think overcoming challenges, you just have to be passionate. You have to be so passionate about what you're doing. If you're passionate, it will give you the focus that you need to be successful. In my experience, the inefficiencies that I saw in law and business day to day was something that was, really alarming to me. And I just thought, hey, there's a better way to do this. And now today, I lead a team of 2 full-timers that help me manage our paralegal resources, and we're all about trying to build efficiency into our own business every day, and we try and promote that to everyone that we work with too. And it almost doesn't feel like work in that regard, because if you're doing something that you're passionate about, it's just so much more enjoyable. And I reflect on that quite often and feel really comfortable with where I'm at for that reason.
Now, I think there's going to be plenty of people sort of listening and thinking, passion is such a hard point to find. I want to know, how long did it take you to find that passion? And specifically, what is it that you're passionate about? Are you passionate about the legal industry and the work? Or are you passionate about finding resources for your clients, being the law firms, to succeed? What is it you're passionate about?
Yeah, look, it's probably about creating opportunities for young law students. I came through my law degree quite late, from the point of view that I'd worked as a journalist for 5 years first in radio and television, and came to the end of my law degree feeling as though I was under a lot of pressure to get a law job. And, even having worked in a law firm concurrently for 3 years while I studied, it was really hard to get that foot in the door. And I reflected on that quite often. I just thought, this is so hard. Why is this so hard? There's plenty of law firms who need people, and it should be easier for people like me to get their foot in the door. Why is it like this? And, it was just something that I always, was really strong on. Subsequent to my own experience, coming through the ranks as a young lawyer, my 3 sisters are all legally trained as well, and they spoke to me about their own experiences with, inefficient work practices, and it just became something that I felt I needed to do for that reason. It was, and this was around the time, sort of 2015, 2016, where sort of, online marketplaces, Uber for this, Freelancer, Airtasker, those sorts of things, were becoming a big deal. And, that was kind of the wider context. It was becoming quite common. And yeah, I guess that was how I got to where I needed to be at the start.
Which I think is a perfect sort of explanation too, with what we were mentioning earlier about building a platform. I think I remember the early days when you were running your business. The craze was building a marketplace like Airtasker and the likes. And obviously you worked out that you don't necessarily need an IT platform to succeed for one of those things, to, I guess, meet a fundamental need, which is key. I want to sort of talk about too, I guess, some of the other challenges you might have faced through family as well. You mentioned you come from a family of lawyers. Was there any hesitation for the idea that you came up with? I suspect there are plenty of people in the industry who are like, this is just not going to work.
Yeah, look, there's always doomsdayers and naysayers, and I guess you go to, in my case, I felt like I studied 2 university degrees, and, with a view to living, I guess, the more standard route, the route of an employee, the loyal, collect your paycheck the idea of going without pay for 18 months when you've spent 10 years at university seems a bit silly, but I was trying to at that time look long term. If I can go without for 18 months, 2 years, then in 10 years I'll have something to show for it, and I'll have learnt a lot along the way. That's really kind of the biggest challenge, I think, maybe aside from finding the courage of to start off is the amount of learning that you have to do along the way. I was probably a little bit naive in that I hadn't managed. Payroll is a huge component of our business now, and I didn't know the first thing about payroll, truth be told, when I started, but I had to learn fast. So that's an example of probably another challenge that I've had along the way. I haven't and don't disclose much of that to my family because I did have to learn quickly, but they were, I guess, always encouraging in the background once I had kicked off, and always keen to ask me how I was going, despite the fact I probably wasn't keen to promote how it was going in the early days, which was, we had to scrap for every client and fight for every win, but that's what you have to do to keep your head above water in the early days.
Yeah, so I guess talk me through a little bit more about, what led you to going down that path of, being an individual who goes to law school and seeks to get that one job and build a career from there. And then do you think that was inspired or encouraged by your parents? Was that a challenge at all, or were they encouraging of you sort of setting up your own business and paving your own path?
Yeah, look, it was probably just circumstances. So I was working in TV journalism, and I had 4 days on and 4 days off, and I'd work a lot of weekends, and that would mean that during the week I didn't have a lot to do, and most of my friends were in 9-to-5 jobs, so I just started studying law to fill in the time, and I did enjoy the challenge of studying and focusing on exams and communicating, whether it be in writing or in person. I've always really enjoyed that. So the transition from media to law was quite streamlined in that regard. Once I got into practice, I guess, I did it for enough to make a call. I did it for long enough, so I guess I was at the point where I felt I could make a decision about what was going to be in my best long-term interest, and I made a decision that starting my own business was something that I wanted to do. To give you some ideas or some pretext around what else I did before I started, is that I started watching a lot of entrepreneurial videos on YouTube. There was a particular series, the Stanford Entrepreneurial Podcast, that I listened to almost religiously day in, day out, and there was just a lot of motivational speakers and people who'd started businesses in those days. They had, I think, Reid Hoffman, who'd started LinkedIn, talking about his journey. They referred me to other resources that I came in contact with. So there's a podcast series, How I Built This, and as an example, they interviewed the founders of Airbnb, and just hugely fascinating in terms of how businesses start off. And in the case of Airbnb, people's first experience is the app. So they think, if I want to build a business like this, I've got to build an app. As it applies to Airbnb, the journey is we could have another podcast talking about what they did, but it's fascinating. Absolutely. And I'd definitely encourage anyone that's starting a business to try and immerse yourself in those sorts of resources, because it just puts you in the headspace where you actually believe that you can do it before you've jumped out of the blocks. And for me, that was huge.
Yeah, perfect. And look, that's what we're building here on this show, and that's why we're so excited to have you, because we're here really to inspire the future business leaders, those that are going to be shaking up particularly the Australian landscape. So that's definitely something that we're looking to do with this show, and great to have you, obviously. One of the things that I want to touch on is, you mentioned what led to your success today was obviously passion passion was a big part for you. Would you say that was the number one factor that led to your success?
You have to be resilient as well. I can think back to a moment where I was working in my last sort of legal role. I dropped down to 3 days a week, so I could work 2 days a week on my own business. And I thought, when I get a big client, I'll transition into full-time work with Yegal. On the day that I thought I had an agreement with this particular big client, I put in my resignation, and I called my old man and I said, I'm doing this now, whatever comes, will happen. A week later, that particular client, the partner, called me up and said, I'm actually leaving the firm to go and work as a management consultant. And I said, what does that do, for our agreement? And he said, oh, look, I can't tell you that, mate. I've made other plans, so, you just have to live with it. And I called my dad back, completely demoralised a week later, and he said, well, you've made your bed now, you got to lie in it. And,
Wow.
I was devastated, but you just keep fighting. That's what you have to do. Once you make your bed, you lie in it. And if
were
you're
you tempted at that point to go back to your employer and be like, can I get that role again?
Yeah, look, maybe, but if you say you're going to do something, then you have to follow through. And that was the other thing that I told friends and family that I was going to do this, and they'd seen the extent to which I'd started planning. Not so much, around what I was going to be doing day to day, but just trying to identify where the legal industry was going. And I could see, there was industry sort of talk about what's now described as legal operations, which is, a very prominent part of the industry these days. There's alternate legal service providers, of which my business, forms part of that sort of subsector. And these particular businesses are showing traditional law firms and corporate legal teams that there's other, players that you can utilize to solve your business challenges. So, as soon as I started seeing the wider environment, it just made it a bit easier for me to take the leap. And I'd encourage anyone to do something similar. Once you've identified your industry and your vertical, if you want to start a clothing business, all right, well, what subsector is it? Is it kids clothing? Then you have to start saying, all right, who else is out there at the moment? What does the landscape look like? Is there a place for what I'm doing? How can I position my business to fit in against the other providers that are out there? What are these other providers doing to market their business? You can, and that costs you nothing but, a Saturday afternoon up at your local library, just going through the internet and looking to see what else is out there. It doesn't cost you any money. You don't need to build a website if you're just doing something as fundamental as that.
And would you say you were first to market in your particular, I guess, area of expertise, or, had you seen someone do the exact same process, exact same service previously, and then you created Yegal? Because obviously there are going to be a number of people who will be like, okay, well, yeah, I'd love to come up with a clothing line, but there are plenty of other clothing lines. So how do I make my clothing line different? And I think that really hinders people jumping in and creating a brand and creating a clothing line or whatever it might be. Tell us a little bit about that. Were you pioneer? Were you first to market?
Yeah, good question. Look, short answer is no. A lot of sort of traditional legal recruitment businesses do tend to have paralegal temp desks, as they're called. None of those legal recruitment businesses, they typically want to play at the top end of the industry. So if they connect a law firm partner from one firm to another, they make a nice big fee out of that. It's harder. They'd consider the paralegal, space where we play as the sort of low-hanging fruit. There is our business model is more high volume, low margin than that sort of top end of town recruitment model. But I guess to that end, none of those standard law firm recruitment businesses tend to put sole emphasis on paralegals. And my attitude around that is, the generation of workers that we connect into jobs, they're the ones that are, technologically literate. They're open to using apps. They're open to moving quickly and using technology to jump into jobs. Whereas, people that are a little bit more senior or have been around the industry a bit longer, they're not going to be able to, I guess, embrace technology the way that we aspire to. So that was always my, mindset. And also, I guess I listened to a podcast that I'd recommend from a fellow called Clayton Christensen, and he talks a lot about how to disrupt industries, and he said that if you really want to make change in an industry, you need to do it from its base, from the bottom of the industry. So he's got a famous example with Dell computers. Dell outsourced the production of different parts of their computers to a rival company or a technology company called Asus. And 20 years ago, 15 years ago, Asus was not as high a profile as it is now. Over time, Dell kept outsourcing all of their different layers of production to Asus, and effectively, over time, they outsourced their whole business to Asus, who is now a huge player in IT and computer hardware. So that was the example that I had.
I literally had no idea that's how you pronounced Asus. I was always saying Asus.
It could well be Asus. I guess it's open to interpretation there, but
keen to take some, tips and pointers on how to pronounce brands for sure.
Yeah, but Clayton Christensen, definitely recommend him for anyone that wants a lesson on how to disrupt, a business vertical. Really, really insightful.
Mate, clearly you listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's something you're recommending for everyone to get onto. Obviously, a little bit of, personal development as well, particularly when you're running your own business. I know that's something that we've learnt over the years. It's that you kind of need to pick up pointers across various different disciplines as well. Like you said, you had no idea about payroll, and you would have had to learn how to do that on your own, Pat Malone. So, podcast is one of those things that you would have used.
Yeah, for sure. Particularly, I'm reflecting on the value that I got out of podcasts and the like when COVID started. When COVID started, I was particularly worried from the point of view that we run a resourcing business, and initially there was a belief that hiring would come to a halt. I was shaking in my boots at that point, but I listened to a lot of podcasts at that time that I guess I tried to hear from people who had been through recessions previously, because as long as I've lived in Australia, which is my whole life, we've had uninterrupted economic growth. So a downturn was not something that I had lived through, and I wasn't sure how I'd manage it. But I listened to a particular podcast from a fellow, Greg Savage, who has been in recruitment for a long time, and he said, sets out a roadmap for how resourcing companies can survive through. And it just gave me the confidence to know that we'd be okay. And, I've never written to Greg to thank him for the podcast or the webinar that he provided, but maybe on the back of this chat, I probably should.
Shout out to Greg. Thanks for that. Obviously, that in I guess conjunction with your resilience as well, that's obviously led to your success. Now, I'm keen to get your perspectives, particularly on, I guess, one of the things in the current business world that you think needs changing. Now, what would that be?
Yeah, look, I think I speak a lot about efficiency, where you and I used to work in the insurance space for a number of years, and that was another instance where I saw, and this, to cut to the chase, the larger the company is, often the more inefficient it can be, and that I find quite astounding, because we're living in an industry now where people everywhere are embracing technology in their day-to-day life, but in a work capacity, too many of us are using systems that are far outdated and don't help us.
Mate, the way I look at it, big companies are like a big bus. They don't turn very well.
No.
You want to be like a nimble, I guess, sports car that can, quickly do a U-turn and, change, I guess, trajectories and pivot and, meet those client needs. I often have the same gripe. Big companies, I see that, we've worked at big companies before. Big data and stuff like that. They're just so ancient and so slow to move, which I think is a great advantage, particularly for startups and particularly for people who want to set up their own businesses. Like, that's something that people need to realize, that they are really coming into the Australian business landscape with something different, being nimble, being agile, being able to hit the market differently, which I think is a huge element. Yeah,
for sure. I think, going back to the example that I gave about, if you wanted to set up a clothing business as a starting point, if you're targeting a particular vertical, then go through businesses that are playing in your space and work out where they might be going wrong. As an example, I think I read something that applies to my industry, legal, that said something like only 4% of law firms use their website for marketing purposes, and I just find that astounding, because in any other business vertical, your website is a key way for you to acquire customers, but in law, it's more about taking people out for lunch and coffee, and I realise that that's the way that the legal industry has always been, but I do think that what we're seeing now is the new firms that are coming onto the scene that are promoting, online customer acquisition strategies are the ones that are more successful than the traditional, firms that we've seen. So, if you can pick apart your particular industry and identify the flaws, then you really should be able to build an offering that is quite different to what else is out there without too much trouble. But I guess it always comes back to knowing your industry and having experience or runs on the board in your particular vertical. That's what I would encourage.
And so what would you say Yegal has done so well to improve in efficiency? What is it specifically?
Yeah, sure. So we do use a lot of technology to be able to connect people to jobs quickly. So as an example, I joke to clients that and paralegals that Friday afternoon is our busiest time. So as an example, a large firm we work with does a lot of work in the cyberspace. And if one of their clients suffers a data breach or a hack, they need paralegal resources quickly. So we use technology in some cases to be able to ensure that 15 paralegals can be available. We'll be notified on Friday afternoon, and we'll use technology to ensure that 15 paralegals are ready for work on Monday, and we do that really quickly. So without the technology and the systems that we've built out over the past 4 years, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. And so, that is a significant advantage to you. Like, why would a big law firm with cash not be able to do that?
It's all about time. For typically what they would do is send around an email saying, is anyone available? And at that point, they would hope for the best. Mm-hmm. Okay, what we do, we're screening paralegals, law students day in, day out, and we're having conversations with people. We're promoting them via, email marketing campaigns, LinkedIn, social media. We've got a campaign just gone out 11 o'clock, 15 minutes ago to, 300 clients. And, we're talking to these people day in, day out, so that when the legal team says, hey, we need people, dial up, dial down, we can move them quicker than you can. Mm-hmm. The example that I would give that a client gave to me in the early doors or early days was that if they put a job ad up, they could have 500 people apply, but it will take us 6 weeks to review all the applicants, and then we might identify 5 applicants. One of them will come to the interview and say, I know all about your law firm, but 5 others will talk about, practice areas that they don't know. And immediately it's kind of like, have we wasted 6 weeks here? We can find the right people, those trusted, reliable people that you need for your practice, tomorrow. And that's the time saving is the value that we deliver. Yeah.
And so what's your vision, I guess, for the future? You think efficiencies would make a big difference in the current landscape, the current world. How do you think that would translate to the world and make the world a better place? And what's the vision for the future?
Yeah, really good question. Look, what we've started doing in the past 12 months, which might surprise you a little bit, is that a law firm partner came to me and said, look, these people are all really good, but if you want to get more of them into jobs, then you need to start training them. So we've started in the past 12 months training our paralegals in specific legal processes that we think makes them more employable. The university sector has been hit quite hard from COVID and the lack of internationals that are coming in, and what we see is that their reliance on the traditional approaches to legal training are around legal theories, but increasingly, if law firms and legal teams are going to be using technology day to day, someone needs to train those law students in the technology that they'll be using, so that when they can jump into a 10 or 12 week Yegal project, they can actually hit the ground running. The result of that now is that we've had 6 people go into a firm last Monday. We've trained them up in a particular process that they'll be using. That process is called e-discovery. Any law student who's listening to this, if your CV doesn't have e-discovery written on it, then you are doing yourself a disservice. You need to learn about e-discovery. It's absolutely par for the course. So e-discovery, electronic discovery, is a process of exchanging evidence using an electronic medium. So when, particularly in big matters, parties exchange large volumes of evidence that may or may not be relevant to their case, and they bring on teams of paralegals to sort through this evidence. And in the old days, everyone talks about having to do it by hand. You would work out whether this particular document was relevant to the issues that are in dispute. Now there is a high reliance on sophisticated software that helps you manage that process.
Yeah, right.
That's what our training embodies, the knowledge and know-how around the software that the law student paralegals have to use. So, it's just one of the ways that we're trying to add value to our paralegals when they're going into jobs. But, tying back to your question about what's our vision, we want to really try and create a streamlined experience so that the law student who goes into one of our partner firms is trained and ready to go, and that's, I guess, part of the vision moving forward.
And I guess the vision, obviously, I can hear is education, and obviously educating your clients and your staff and your team. That's a huge element of it. One of the things I'm keen on, I guess, finding out a little bit more info about is obviously some of the individuals that are listening out there. There might be paralegals who are keen to potentially even contact you. I'm not sure if this is a challenge you've faced already, but talk to me about how law firms would perceive their CV if they've worked for Yegal for 12 months, for example. How do law firms perceive that, as opposed to, if you're in private practice, what we tend to see with some of those clients is, if you go into government, you're in government land and you haven't really had private practice experience. Are you finding private practice is acknowledging the experience they're getting with legal?
Most definitely, yeah. And that's shown because a lot of the people that we've put through our ranks are going on to the grad roles. Some of our original paralegals have got 3+ years experience in practice now, and that's because of the jobs that we gave them, on day one. So many of the people that we speak to say, that they'll turn up and they'll have limited, office experience, law firm experience. To those people, if you're approaching the final stages of your law degree, you need to try and get paid experience as quickly as you can, because there's so many people applying for those clerkships and those grad programs, and being able to document familiarity with law firm processes can be the difference. Having great academics is one thing, but the best candidates have some form of undergraduate legal office experience, and to say things like, once I get admitted and once I'm finished my degree, I'll be okay. Look, my message is maybe not. You need to do what you can while you're studying to try and build up your experience, and Yegal can help open doors for you. So, if you're motivated, if you're hearing this and you want to try and build up some final year experience before you finish your law studies, jump onto our website and apply today.
And obviously you've got a great business model that you've built out, which is fantastic. So I think you're definitely going to succeed into the future. But what's it going to take from here? Are you looking at getting some funding? Are you looking at bringing on some additional partners? How are you going to scale this business?
Yeah, look, that's really interesting. I did do a lot of reading up on, venture capital, and it's still an industry that I probably don't know a lot about. But I can think back to 2017, 2018. I've been a regular at a number of different startup events and networking. I try and make myself a bit of a feature at those type of events, and I went along to StartCon, which is run by the founder of Freelancer, a guy called Matt Barry, who's someone who's not short of an opinion. And in one of his conference talks, he spoke about this concept of Raymond profitability, which is, instead of going out and promoting yourself to venture capitalists, he was trying to promote this idea of Raymond profitability, which is basically live off 2-minute noodles until you're profitable. Yeah. And that was something that I really identified with, because, I've always kind of considered myself as a bit of a scrapper, and I liked that idea of, having to, work really hard to get yourself ahead, because, nothing is ever really given to you on a silver platter. Even if a business like mine was able to, raise a funding round, which, would never say never to, that creates a whole new set of challenges. Okay.
Yeah.
And that process of funding is quite separate to the day-to-day challenge of speaking to clients. So you've got to juggle both hats. again, plenty of businesses that are out there are doing it, and I'm open to any conversation at any time with anyone that's got an interest in my business. But in the meantime, I just want to talk to customers as many as I can, for as often and as long as I can.
Because there's obviously debates as to whether taking funding is a great thing, right? Sure, it might give you the resources to scale and push into various other areas that you may not have if you don't have the money. Bring on some experience, bring on some additional people, but you do give away a little bit of that control, right? Have you had any experience with that? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
look, what I would recommend to anyone that's in a position where they think they've got an idea that they want to act on, and I don't want to say this was to my detriment, but find someone to get in the trenches with you. If you've got someone to help row the boat with you, a co-founder who has, skills that are probably on the flip side to your own, you typically find someone that can, build technology and would partner with someone like myself who more is sales and operational. That is generally what any good business is going to have. If you've got those two people that are rowing in the same direction, it's so much easier. I didn't have anyone in those early days, and I would complain to friends and family, over lunch or dinner or a drink. But, having someone in the trenches with you makes it a lot easier to, live off ham and cheese sandwiches or, 2-minute noodles or, $1 coffees at 7-Eleven. If someone else is in there with you doing it, it doesn't seem as bad. So,
how long were you on 2-minute noodles, mate?
Oh, look, probably 18 months.
Jesus, really?
Look, no, not really. I think I used to joke after about 12 months that I'd moved away from ham and cheese sandwiches. But you need to make those level of sacrifices because even if you are profitable, you need to reinvest the money that you've made back into the business. If that's in my case, it was moving on to an accounting platform to help me manage the payroll. You can't take your money and go and lie on the beach somewhere. You need to invest it back into the business. And the longer you're willing to live on, ramen noodles, the better the long-term outcome I see it. And I guess I was very lucky that, my sister let me live in her study for 18 months, which was a huge, huge help to me and helped reduce my personal expenses. So that's probably another bit of advice that I'd have for someone that was, keen to go out and try do something. What can you do to reduce your own personal expenditure in the short term, noting that it may take 12 to 18 months to get started.
Mate, awesome. Mate, honestly, it's been great to have you on the show. It's been good to see where Yegal has come from, where you started and how long it's taken you to build, and the future is looking definitely very bright for you, mate. So great to have you on the show. Do you want to have a little bit of a plug of your socials if anyone wants to get in contact with you? How do they do that?
Yeah, sure. Yegal.com.au, yegal.com.au for any law firm or general counsel looking for additional resources. Myself and my team can help you out at a moment's notice. If you're a paralegal law student looking for experience, jump onto our I Am a Paralegal section of the website and apply today. We've got a standard screening process that kicks off with a video call. We'll help anyone who applies, to get where they want to go. And that's our first question that we ask to anyone who applies. Where do you want to be in 5 years and how can we help you get there? So, jump on our website and check us out.
Awesome. Not on Instagram?
We do have a Yegal Academy Instagram page. Yep, jump on that and give us a like. We promote our core values and a few of our paralegals on there, so worth a look as well. And our Facebook page, all our posts go on Facebook too. So definitely jump onto those resources and have a look.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. That is an episode with Michael Buggy from Yegal. Mate, it's been great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you, mate. Cheers. Socius, thank you for joining us today. Please hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to be part of the Socius community, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in touch. Cheers.